Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is the second video in my Let's Learn Ruby series. And what I want to do is kind of cover just basic assignment and variables, maybe conditionals in this video. And if you've used Python before, really any programming language, this is going to seem very familiar, but the syntax is going to look very clean. So let's do this. So again, kind of like Python, you don't need to put like a weird declarator in front of you. No cons, no lets. You just assign data. So you can assign integer. So I can be like my int equals 5. I can assign a string. So I can be like my string equals hello. Okay. I can do a float. My float equals 65.676. Again, a float is a number with a decimal. Okay, I can assign Boolean. My bool. And again, a Boolean is always either true or false. Cool. All of these are acceptable values that you can just assign to a variable, and you just give the variable a name. Okay. So now let's actually print these to the screen. So puts, and we'll do my int, my stir, my fl, and my bool. We'll just print all of these to the screen. Okay. So let's run that file, rubytesting.rb, and rerun it. And we got this little thing in the way. So there you go. You see, we printed out the 5, the integer, the string, the 65.76, the float, and the Boolean of true. Okay, so working with data is pretty straightforward. Okay, yeah. So that's a thing. Okay, next let's talk about conditionals. Okay, so, or actually, let's talk about the operators first. So you can do all sorts of expressions, and whenever you think of an expression could be small, short, long. The idea is that it reduces itself when it's done into one value. That's when you think of an expression. You're gonna get one thing when that expression is done. So I could sit there and say my variable equals 5 plus 5. That's an expression. Because when this expression resolves itself, there's only going to be one thing left. 5 plus 5 is going to be 10. So just puts my var. Okay. And let's just run the script. Okay, this thing keeps popping in the way. Smart commands execution. Got it. I got it. Don't show me this message again, please. There you go. And see, we get 10. And this expression can go on and on and on. I can be like 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, which that should all be 25. But see, it's going to run through this entire expression. This expression is going to keep going till it resolves into one thing. And then this equal signs means, hey, take the result of this expression and store it in this little cubbyhole, my variable. Okay, so in that case, I'm going to get 25. 25. Okay, very cool. Okay, so just to kind of understand what the term expression means. It could be a whole lot of stuff going on, but when it's all said and done, it's going to reduce itself down to sort of a thing or nothing, which then you just kind of get back like a undefined or a null or something. Okay, cool. So that's add, but there's all sorts of different operators. We could do 5 minus 5, 5 times 5. So all the same operators you're probably used to in other programming languages. 5 divided by 5. And more importantly is going to be sort of the Boolean operators, the ones that test whether something's true or false. Because the math operators are usually pretty straightforward. I mean, if you know math, you'll understand the operators. The issue is if you don't know math, then you probably need to do that first. And we're not talking about like calculus, we're just talking about like just basic arithmetic. My variable. Okay, so let's do some Boolean stuff. So let's say here it's 5 greater than 6. 5 is not greater than 6. But since this is going to resolve to a true or false, so it's a Boolean expression. So in this case, what we get back should be true or false. see what we get back, and we get back false because 5 is not greater than 6. But if I did change this to less than, is 5 less than 6, I will get true. And I can change this to is 5 less than or equal than 6. That's still true. But if I change that to greater than or equal than 6, it's now going to be false again. Okay. And then what if I want to see if they are the same thing? 5 equals, 2 equal signs will be for equality. So is 5 and 6 the same thing? So this is going to resolve to true or false. And then that value of true gets assigned to the variable. Well, in this case, false. So false, because 5 and 6 are not the same thing. But 6 and 6 are the same thing, so this time it should resolve as true. And we get true. Okay. And the thing is, we can actually have compound Boolean statements. Okay. It always shows up one of two ways, so let's try it out. Okay, so let's do 6 equals 6 and 5 equals 5. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is going to first resolve this expression. That's going to resolve to be true. This will resolve to be true. And then this, so then now we have this expression that's true and true. So both need to be true for the and to resolve as true. But since they are both true, it'll resolve as true. Okay, so let's just see if that works. And true. There you go. And I can do an or. Well, let's actually make one false. So if I say this 5 equals 6, 5 equals 6 is false. But 6 equals 6 is true. That should give me back false because they're not both true. So I get false. But I can change this to an or instead. So 2 little sticks. So only one of them has to be true. Which 6 equals 6 is true. So we get back true. Okay, so this is just basically your typical Boolean expressions. And you can make those super complicated. But the reason that matters is you might want to use an expression like that for an if statement. Okay, so an if would work like this. Okay, so there we go. If. Okay. And one of the nice things about Ruby is you don't have to have all these parentheses and all these curly brackets. So in this case, I would just do if my var, so it'll be like if my var is true, then the code under the if runs. It doesn't have to even be tabbed. So it's going to tab it because it's just good practice to tab your code. But unlike Python, where you have to tab it because there is no curly brackets, it doesn't matter. Because as soon as it hits the else, it knows, okay, there's the else block. And then when it hits the end, it knows that's the end of this whole block. So in this case, you don't need tabs because you can just do ends. But you'd still probably want to, again, tab your code just for make your code pretty. So tab, this is true. So this will happen if it's true. And then else is what happens if it's false. So puts this is false. Okay. And we can get rid of this line here. So right now this resolves as true, so this is true should run. Let's see, we get this is true. Now if I change this back to an and, because both those expressions are not true, so this is going to result as false now. And see, it says this is false. Okay, but see, that's like a very clean look. It's not a bad deal. Now the cool thing about Ruby that I haven't really seen in any other language other than like Crystal, because it's based on Ruby, is that it actually has a conditional for if it is false, which if I remember correct is unless. Let me see if I'm right. Okay, so let's try it out. So in this case it would be unless my var, otherwise it's the same syntax. The only difference is that now the unless block runs if this is false, if my var is false, and the else block runs if it's true. Okay, because it's basically doing the opposite of the if. So let's run that. And see, now this is false because we're running the true part. Because since this is false, it runs this part. So now if I change this back to an or, and it'll resolve as true, it'll run the else. So that's a neat thing when it comes to Ruby, that you have that option. That's not something you really have in other languages. Not that it's a hard thing to emulate, but you know, it's a thing. It's a thing you can use. So that's pretty cool. I'll see you guys in the next video. But again, just always remember that at the end of any block of code, whether it's a loop or a conditional, at the end, there's always got to be an end. And an end always kind of closes the block, sort of the most recently opened block. So you have to always like make sure there's enough ends to get to the block you're trying to close. It's you know, it's just basically like curly brackets. Curly brackets are contained. The only difference is that you're not using curly brackets. You're using these end statements to mark sort of the end of the block.